Hello there, everyone. You're listening to episode 91 of Around the Hearth, a Hearthstone podcast brought to you by a couple of guys who just want to smoke. As always, I'm Rob Bobson.
And I'm Adam.
On every show, we like to give a special shout out to our patrons that make this show possible for their continued support. Louise, Michael, Kira, Jennifer, Huckman, Daniel. If you would like to join this list of amazing people around the hearth and get some other cool rewards, please do check out patreon.com/aroundthehearth. The link will be in the show notes. And if you're watching us live and you have Amazon Prime, please consider using your Twitch Prime sub to get some sweet ATH emotes to use in the chat. Each Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern. If you can't sub, then follows are always more than welcome. We love the support all the same. Now, on to our weeks in Hearthstone. How was your week in Hearthstone, Adam?
Pretty light, for a reason I will get into later. But I did do my Deck of the Week homework with Gonk, which I will cover later, and I played the first leg of the special 3 weeks of Tavern Brawl, the Rumble Clash or whatever it's called. That was pretty fun. Yeah. It's pretty. Yeah. I'm looking forward to playing more with broken cards because those are fun.
Yeah. Oh, broken hero powers.
And broken hero powers.
Good. Yeah. I felt bad playing Hunter in the Tavern Brawl.
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Well, I did play all the classes, so because as I usually do, just check them out. And Hunter was by far the most impressive.
Well, no, by far just the worst. It was just bad.
Yeah.
Rogues was pretty nuts.
Oh.
Mages was pretty nuts.
When I said
Paladin.
Yeah, when I meant impressive, I meant to me.
Oh, I was gone for depressing to play.
Oh, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah, when I played Hunter, I was just like, this sucks. It was the only class I didn't manage to get a win with.
Oh, the irony. That was it for me, and then I decided I wasn't going to play Hearthstone this week for a very specific reason. But Robson, I'm sure you had a busier week in Hearthstone than I did.
A little bit. I'm kind of like apparently setting myself a new personal record for how long I can be at rank 1 without going either up or down. I think I'm on about 30 games at this point. So 50% win rate.
You're getting gatekeeped? You, the Robson, getting gatekeeped at rank 1.
Well, no, more just like I can't find a deck that I really want to play. I'll play maybe 2 games of the deck and then get bored and lose, and then just kind of repeat ad infinitum. So
I guess this is. I mean, if you want to get to Legend, I guess it's harder to take risks and play the kooky decks,
Well, it's more just like I'm not that bothered about actually getting to Legend. It's just like I've been at this rank for a long time now. I think I should. It's more just the fact that I haven't gone down either is weird. Solid 50%. That's me right now. But I played a fair bit of the Tavern Brawl as well. Because I have 3 accounts and the quest was play, not win, which was a fantastic change, by the way. So because I had to play 3 times and I had 3 accounts, I was like, well, that's a good opportunity to just play each class once. And I won with 8 of them and lost with Hunter. Because Hunter was
not very good.
Real bad. It was just a series of random cards. Like, Infest was in there for some reason with no other cards like that. I don't know what was going on there. It just got dumpstered.
Normally I'd say 100 good stuff usually leads to a good deck, but not this time.
It's because there wasn't Rexar in it.
That's a good point.
They just need that Rexar, but besides that, I've done a little bit of casting, a little bit of coaching, all my usual
Oh,
stuff. It's been,
didn't you have a game with some stakes involved where where the loser had to engineer the WESG stream for Europe?
no, not the WSG teams. It was myself against Ilu, a Belgian player, and we were kind of we were kind of joking, saying that we would play to see who would have to produce all the EU streams for the next Badass Woman of Hearthstone tournament, and I lost.
Well,
It was
guess your schedule got a little bit
great.
busier then.
Well, don't know when the next tournament's going to be, so hopefully it's in a while, because it's fine. I don't mind doing it, But that was my week in Hearthstone. It's been enjoyable. I'm kind of taking a more casual approach recently and just doing more casting and coaching than I am actual playing, and it's been great.
I kind of just want some new stuff to show up.
Don't we all, man? But now that we've spoken about our weeks, what's been happening in the news this week, Adam?
All right. So during this past week, and you'll understand why I hadn't played much Hearthstone this week. Blizzard's annual phone call to its investors occurred, in which it was very pleased to announce that in 2018, the company grossed the most revenues it has ever had in its history, and profits were up in comparison to last year. Yay! Good news, right? Well, that news came along with some news that they would be, air quotes, allocating their resources into more development for games and features, and normally that would sound good. Unfortunately, what that really means is that they were effective immediately laying off 8% of their total workforce, almost 800 employees. Most of the layoffs included personnel in non-dev roles such as social media, community management, and esports. The news has shocked and saddened many, myself included. As a result of this, I kind of boycotted Hearthstone for the rest of the week. And the ad was viewed widely as disgusting. We at Around the Hearth wish to share our condolences and offer support to those affected by these events. We want to thank you for your tireless commitment to the games we love. We know how talented and passionate you are about what you do, and hope that you can land on your feet very soon. So this was kind of like a morale blow to the community, honestly.
This sucked. I even saw that the people at Blizz Pro, which is like the number one We Love Blizzard thing, are just considering not doing it anymore after this.
Yeah, I did read that article, yeah.
And that's a big thing. They've been making that for like 20 years, and now they're just like, nah,
well,
screw Blizzard.
What you have to understand is most of the old guard from Blizzard is gone, and this new, since the merger with Activision, Brian I think his name is Brian Bostic or something like that.
Bobby Kostick.
Bobby Kostick, which is...
Sorry, Bobby Cock.
It's a name of it sounds like a name of a supervillain, basically. It's basically now the CEO of Blizzard, so he even though he doesn't necessarily have power, because there is a board which can overrule him, it has more voting power, still makes it is integral to making a lot of the key decisions, and especially with the new CFO in place, that probably had a lot to do with this. But it is very sad. A lot of great people lost their jobs, and that really, really blows.
Yep. It's just kind of sucked.
Yeah. That's not to say that, there's a small bit of good side you can take. That is, if they're allocating more resources and development, maybe that means we'll see content come out faster, or more content, but we don't know that just yet.
It probably just means they're putting more money into Overwatch. Let's be honest.
They do like Overwatch a lot. That thing is a cash cow right now. Anyway, speaking of esports, not or Overwatch esports, being considered a non-priority. Do we have any esports news this week, Bobson?
Well, I mean, basically no, but the dry spell esports-wise continues, and really we're all just waiting for the announcement to come from Blizzard and HS Esports about what exactly the future holds for Hearthstone as an esport. Coincidentally, last week, the head of EU HS Esports, Wei Yu, quit his job and I don't know, but the timing of the head of EU HSE Sports just quitting like a week before this big announcement is due seems a bit weird.
I think he knew I guess he must have known about it beforehand.
I don't know. Like, but he also quit at exactly the same time. So many people were laid off, which seemed also very strange. But whatever. But as it happens, that announcement about the future of HSE Sports has been postponed from the 19th of this month to the 21st. So we should be hearing something finally this Thursday as opposed to this Tuesday. As an indicator of how dire really things are right now, DreamHack Leipzig's top 16 played out this weekend and didn't even have an official stream. Only thanks to some players and casters just randomly banding together was anything streamed whatsoever. I didn't know about the unofficial streams until the whole thing was basically finished, so I don't even know who won. Great. And the Wild Open qualifiers also took place this weekend. Again, weren't streamed, except from individual players' perspectives. And I couldn't even find the bracket for the qualifiers, so I don't even know who made the global top 8. Big yikes.
Yeah, I don't understand that, because considering it's a Blizzard event, and you definitely want to make sure you have content up, but I know this entire week was the opening week for, sorry to bring this up, Overwatch League. That started this week. So maybe they just were like, okay, let's just focus all our resources on that. And
well, maybe they would have more resources if they hadn't fired so many people.
Ooh, sick burn.
Yeah, esports. We'll know what the future holds
this week.
Next episode.
Yeah. And then winter playoffs come up at the end of the month.
Winter champs.
Winter champs, rather. Sorry.
Then world champs, and then
worlds.
That'll be an interesting one because it'll be interesting to see who is actually still playing Hearthstone that's qualified. Because most players are just playing auto chess right now.
Yeah, I see a lot of Hearthstone streamers not playing Hearthstone or not streaming at all, except for Tice. Tice will always stream Hearthstone.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of content streamers still stream, but the competitive ones have just completely
like numbers in numbers in Hearthstone viewership are way down.
Yeah, because there's not that many people playing it. Loads of people are taking some time off from the game. Like I look at my friends list on the America server particularly, and so many people like who would be just playing like every day are just like away for 6 days, away for a week, away for 2 weeks, away for more than a month in some cases. It's like, well, this looks great.
Well,
good job, guys. Good job, everyone.
I guess, there definitely needs to be something to spark interest in the community again. Else, this game is going to start to fade out of existence. Even though it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy though, because Hearthstone is like the second biggest revenue generator for Blizzard. So you would feel like they wouldn't want to abandon that.
You'd think so, but it's not going great. But hopefully they have some bigger plans. I'd just like to see something new happen. But we spoke about this a lot last week, we shouldn't go over it all again. Anyway, let's go on to something a bit more positive, and let's talk about what we did with Card of the Week.
All right, so last week our card of the week was Gonk the Raptor, the Druid Loa. Big boy likes that plays around with and says, "Hey, I like you attacking things with your face and killing them."
Oh yeah.
So how did we fare? Well, Robson suggested last week Odd Druid, which of course I tried. It was kind of a bit of a mess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it turns out getting a 2 armor 2 attack hero power for 2 mana isn't that good. And eliminating a lot of the even cards also isn't that good. So, yeah, I want to say I'm the only reason I got any wins with this deck was because I'm in low ranks right now. So I would not suggest Odd Druid to anybody, especially with Gonk.
Well, I found out that Odd Taunt Druid was kind of good, and then I wound up in a position where the best odd Druid list I came up with was one that just cut Gonk. So then I was like, oh. I mean, it's an okay deck, but it wasn't quite focusing on card of the week anymore. So I was like, all right, screw this. Then I tried Quest Gonk OTK Druid.
Yes, there's a lot of things going on there, which apparently I've heard went pretty well.
Well, when you say pretty well, I mean I did manage to actually OTK someone with the deck, and then I was like, okay, I'm done.
Mission complete. Let's get out of here, boys.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, the way you can OTK with Gonk is if you have multiple Gonks through Cube, Faceless Manipulator, etc., etc., etc. Every time you attack and kill a minion, you get 2 extra attacks. So you clear the board, and for every minion you kill, you get an extra attack to face. So say you kill 6 minions, and you have played double Pounce and Hero Powered, so you have 5 attack. That is 30 damage right there.
Boom.
Although the way I did it was I killed 5 minions with 5 attack, did 25 damage to the face, and then UI'd them when I had no cards left in my deck.
I mean,
still works.
It still worked.
Yeah, and because if you have the twig, then you can UI having done all the stuff previously. When you have 0 mana minions, thanks to the quest, it gets a little bit silly, which was great fun. And I got some begrudging well plays from the people I played against.
Would you be willing to?
That's what matters.
Would you be willing to share your deck list in this week's show notes for those who wish to try it out? Maybe they'll have better success than we did.
Oh, I wouldn't advise anyone trying out that deck.
Okay.
I think I've already deleted it.
No, fair enough.
I was like, I'm done, never again. But Adam, what's this week's card?
All right, this week's card is a Warlock legendary from the Boomsday expansion, Dr. Morrigan. I actually don't have the card in front of me, but I remember it's an 8-drop with like 4/4 stats, and it says...
It is an 8 mana 5/5.
5/5.
Death Rattle, swap this with a minion from your deck.
I think I've tried this card before, and I didn't understand how it worked, and then I'm like, wait, this card isn't very good.
Yeah, so there was originally OTK with this, but it turns out that it doesn't quite work. So the idea was if you have Knife Juggler, then you have Knife Juggler on the board, you play this, then you Baleful Banker this into your deck, so it is the only minion remaining. Then you Dark Pact this, so then... Wait, no. There was... No, you have to have Spirit Singer Umbra up on the board as well. Then you have Spirit Singer Umbra and Knife Juggler.
That sounds fun,
have
actually.
it so it's the only minion in the deck, and then it goes back and forth. But I think it's a maximum of 12 iterations it does, and then it stops, something like that.
So you can't do like the Dr. Morrigan circus with this thing?
I mean, I'm still going to try it and see what exactly it does, because I never actually tried that interaction. I just heard that's what happens. So I'll try it, because honestly, besides that, I don't know what to do with this card.
I have a question. Can this pull the darkness out of your deck as a 2020, or is that not going to work?
I believe the darkness in its state is actually the non-targetable blob, rather than like it starts dormant. Like its main state is dormant.
Oh, so yeah, there's no way. I was gonna say that would be pretty cool if you could yank a 2020 out of your deck.
Yeah, that's why you can't like Unstable Evolution into a 4-mana 2020. You Unstable Evolution into the dormant thing, and then you can't even target it, and then you're sad because not only are you playing Shaman, you've just got
this deck
like one less board space.
The problem with this card is that like if it grabs something with a key battle cry, then like you kind of wasted it. You kind of wasted a card. You know what I mean?
As well as having played an 8-mana 5/5.
Yeah, that's true too. You're also playing a very grossly understated minion.
Yeah, this card is honestly real bad. So I'm gonna have to think of something good to make this work.
Yeah,
because right now I got nothing.
Yeah, we're really gonna have to go into the tank for this one this week. So whoever suggested this, thank you.
This was a at Sean Ryan _5 suggested this one. So
thanks for that. We'll do our best, but
for...
I'm not gonna promise any miracles.
Yeah, just absolutely. I don't know what's going to happen with this, but maybe we'll think of something. But moving on from card of the week, we have our deck of the week this week, which is what I'm very excited about. So the deck of the week this week is comes from at Jaden _HS, and it's a wild aggro odd druid, and was suggested by Twitter user at Andrews Living, aka the host of the Happy Hearthstone. So shout out to him. Deck code will be in the show notes as always. So anyone who listens to this show knows that there are certain archetypes that I have desperately tried to make work over and over again. Odd Druid is definitely one of those. I bring it up whenever I can and never quite make it work, but this deck was, like I said, created by Jaden HS and piloted to 1 win off Legend by at Trimble. So clearly it has some potential. They had like a 70% win rate with it over about 50 plus games. So essentially it plays very much like old school aggro token druids did, wherein the strategy is to flood the board early with a multitude of token minions, then buff those minions and finish off with a huge Savage Roar burst turn. So those aforementioned token minions, all duplicates in this deck obviously, are Firefly, Dire Maul, Enchanted Raven, and Bloodsail Corsair. And of course you couldn't have Bloodsail Corsair without Patches the Pirate as well. Also in the 1-drop slot we have Mark of the Lotus, which is the kind of quintessential token druid buff card. And Living Roots is sort of a mixture of removal in the early game, burst damage in the late game, or just 2 extra tokens to go alongside the Mark of the Lotus. Then in the 3-drop slot, we've got, of course, double Savage Roar to just finish games off and do a stupid amount of damage. Vicious Fledgling for those occasional games where it just solo carries if it isn't removed when it's immediately played. We've all experienced a lot of those, I'm sure. South Sea Captain to buff up the Corsairs and Patches, as well as pull Patches if you haven't already. Druid of the Scythe is either a proactive minion with Rush or a taunt to protect your smaller minions. And finally, of course, Ironbeak Owl to push through Void Lords and Obsidian statues, which if you play Wild, there's a lot of those, just everywhere. And finally, at the high end, we have the ubiquitous minion for any kind of minion-based aggressive deck. A couple of Fungal Monsters, they just go in everything right now. The aggro or mid-range Wild staple that is Loatheb, block out your opponent's removal on turn 5, if they are something like a Big Priest, really looking to get their Coin Light Bomb, Coin Dragonfire, Coin Scream, anything like that just completely shuts them out. The classic Burst Finisher, Leroy Jenkins, don't need any explanation there. And another blast from the past for just kind of aggressive decks looking to curve out Dr. Boo. It's nice to see him again. He kind of fell off a bit for a while, but he works in this deck as he's just a good late game aggressive odd card. There's also a bit of extra punch in the form of Druid of the Claw, which can, somewhat like Druid of the Scythe, either provide a little bit extra reach and some 4 face damage, or provide a taunt to protect your smaller minions. And finally, of course, we have Baku the Moon Eater, which in this deck is almost never played, and every time you draw it, you're fantastically sad, because by the time you get there, you've probably already lost the game. So, the question is, why would you play Odd Druid over a traditional token druid? Is the hero power really worth losing such key cards as particularly Mark of Yashiraj and Power of the Wild? So quite honestly, probably not.
After all this.
That's just being quite honest, but it doesn't, it's close. It doesn't really feel like you're missing out on too much. Those 2 cards are really the only thing you're missing from like an even package. Like 4 drops in Token Druid, if you have even and odd cards, are branching paths perhaps, evolving spores. None of those really are particularly good. Like branching paths is, I guess, okay, But it's those two 2-drops that are like the real omission, and the hero power goes like maybe 60% of the way to making up for it. And the draw from Mark of Yashariz is really kind of the big thing there. This deck doesn't have any ways to kind of cycle in the way that Mark of Yashariz does, so there is a little bit of danger of running dry. But on the other side, you get to be winning games with an odd Druid. You get to bamboozle your opponent with the background animation going off when you're a Druid, which is always you always get the greetings when they see that go, what are they doing? What's going on? So you get a bit of extra fun factor as opposed to regular token Druid. And you still get to go face, which I am a big fan of, and we're going to be talking a lot more about going face in just a second. So winning games, playing odd Druid, it's fun. The deck is definitely worth checking out. So is it optimal? Probably not. But is it fun? Yes. So that was our deck of the week. Shout out to the people that suggested it and the people who created it. If you have a suggestion for deck or card of the week you'd like us to play around with, remember you can shoot them to us on Twitter at @AroundTheHearth or post them in our Discord, the link to which will be in the show notes with every episode. Now, Adam, let's move on to this week's main topic.
All right, cool. So here on Around the Hearth, we're all about our community and our listeners. We like you guys a lot. We know that there's a lot of you out there who want to be better Hearthstone players, and maybe there are certain deck types that you want to play with or play against where you could use some improvement. And maybe you're rich in money, you want to go hire some kind of coach. Hold that thought. We've got you covered. So over the next 3 shows, we're going to give you our tips for being better players with 3 main playstyles in Hearthstone: aggro, control, and combo. Because you can't spell fundamentals without fun. This week we're going to take a look at I like that one. This week we're going to take a look at aggro and give you some core principles on how to pilot these kind of decks for more effectively against the 3 main styles of decks, and dispel the many myths that surround aggro. So, Dr. Robobson, what is an aggro deck?
So, broadly speaking, an aggro deck is one which is looking to get out of the gates before their opponent, overwhelm them before they can react, and to end the game before their opponent can stabilize. Different decks and different classes all seek to do this in slightly different ways, of course, as they all have different tools available to them, and their hero powers kind of dictate the way that they should play, in a sense. But the core principle is always looking to force your opponent to react, or they will lose. Like, I think the purest example of just playing aggro and forcing them to react or they will lose was just when you were able to innovate out a Flappy Bird on turn 1 and just say, kill this or I win the game. That's aggro in its purest form, but there's a lot more depth to it than that. But that example is just, yep, if you don't have the answer, I win. And that's what aggro is all about. So some classes are more akin to more kind of suited to aggro, Hunter being the obvious example for just the quintessential aggro class, which has only really recently lost that kind of tag. But that doesn't mean you can't play aggro in any class, though if you're playing Priest, it's a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I was trying to say
Hunter.
I would say probably Priest is the most difficult class to play aggro with. All the other classes are pretty good at it, though.
Yeah, to varying degrees.
Yeah.
So
anyway, so the general strategy with aggro decks is you want to push damage to the opponent fast via a combination of constant mini damage, spells, and weapon attacks if you have them. You won't necessarily be playing with you won't necessarily be dealing damage with your hero's face, but it is something that can happen in certain classes. Most of the really good aggro classes can do that.
Pirate Warrior,
yeah,
I miss you.
I do too. You're typically trying to end the game as fast as you can, either in the early or mid game. And the longer the game goes on, the harder it's going to be to finish because you're going to eventually run out of resources.
But I think the other aspect of that is not only are you more likely to run out of resources, but the more mana your opponent has, the more opportunity they have to counter what you are doing and stabilize. It's really hard to kind of clear a board on turn 3 or 4. It's a lot easier to clear a board on turn 8 if against control decks in particular.
Yeah, so so basically the more opportunities you give your opponent, the more they can capitalize and stabilize, which is what we don't want. We want their face to explode.
To be dead.
We want their face to explode.
Right.
Anyway, so let's talk. So now we know what an aggro deck is and what the general strategy is. Let's talk about some fundamentals. The fun part of this. So the first fundamental skill in aggro, which is probably the biggest one, is knowing when to go face versus when to trade with your opponent's minions.
Yeah. So there is a kind of misconception. I think it's one of the biggest misconceptions about playing aggro is you should not trade as much as possible. You should always be going face. And that is just wrong. Trading is important in pretty much all aggro decks, especially in an aggro deck like Zoo or Odd Paladin, which focuses really heavily on board control. But the reason that trading is really important in aggressive decks is because, like Adam just said, you want to be pushing constant minion damage. And if you allow your more damage dealing minions to be traded into or killed off by your opponent, then you are losing a significant amount of constant damage. So if you use some of your weaker attack minions to kill off your opponent's minions so they cannot trade into your most offensive minions, you will be doing less damage on that particular turn, but in future turns you are upping the overall amount of damage you're going to be doing. So thinking about how much damage you can do every single turn in your future turns is really important. So often you want to be value trading, particularly against other aggressive decks.
Just real quick, can you just give a brief definition of what a value trade would be?
So a value trade is, say you using a healthy minion on your side to kill off a weakened minion on your opponent's side of the board, leaving your minion still alive. So say you have a 1-2 and your opponent has a 1-1 and you also have a 2-1 on your side of the board. What you would do there is use the 1-2 to kill the 1-1, leaving you with a 1-1 and a 2-1.
Yeah, so it basically strengthens your board position, and it basically is kind of an example of card advantage. We'll talk about card advantage, in future episodes of this, because card advantage is an important concept to learn in Hearthstone. But yeah, so trading is basically the big myth is never trade. The real answer is trading is fine, but you need to be strategic when you do it.
Absolutely.
Piggyback on what Robinson said, the next fundamental skill you need to plan your and this is I think with any deck you need to plan, and this is actually more important with aggro decks. You need to plan your turns ahead of time. So the big myth with aggro decks is that everyone hates aggro decks. There's a lot of people who hate aggro decks, and they're saying, well, they're really easy to play. You don't have to make any as many decisions as my deck, and they're mindless. But the reality of that is because you actually are making decisions, you just make fewer of them. And because you're making fewer of them, it adds more weight to the decisions. So every small decision is actually more impactful on the success of your game.
Yep. I am a coach, and quite honestly, I find that I need to kind of coach aggro more than I need to coach control, which is not what you really expect. A lot of people go into aggro decks having at least, I think, internalized a little bit that kind of myth that aggro is easy to play, you just go face. But because you have such a shorter window of the game, the importance of every decision you make is amplified. What you do on your turn 1, your turn 2 as an aggro deck holds so much more weight than what you do on your turn 1 or turn 2 as a control deck, where the games are going to go long. Because everything you do in your kind of 6-7 turn window of a game will dictate whether you are going to win or lose that game.
Yeah, so basically, it's smaller decisions, more weight. So when you're thinking about when you're a turn, you say, okay, what am I actually doing next turn with the mana I have available, and what do I have on board? And you just have to be mindful of you like playing in the moment is okay sometimes, but most of the time you need to be planning ahead too.
Yeah, you need to be thinking, okay, so if I play this minion this turn, how much damage am I going to be doing next turn? If I play this minion and hero power this turn, how much damage am I doing next turn? If my opponent plays this card, how much damage will I still have? How much will I be able to kill their minion on board? Will I be able to push damage to the face? There's a lot of thought that goes into playing aggro, which a lot of people don't give it credit for. I'm a huge fan of aggro decks, particularly face decks. Those are some of my favorite kinds of decks.
Oh,
to
me
play.
too.
Like, my second ever standard legend was with Pirate Warrior. My first ever wild legend was with Face Hunter at a time when Paladin was really popular, so that one was really difficult. I don't know why I did that, but I think face deck is kind of the purest form of aggro. There's lots of different kinds of aggro decks, which we didn't really sort of go into, and they all need to plan out their turns in kind of different ways.
Yeah, that goes. Yeah, planning out your turn is, you're not absolved from that, no matter which aggro deck you play,
Or whatever deck you play.
or whatever deck you play. Period. Yeah. Speaking of planning your turns ahead, we also have to be able to read the opponent. Like, so the good news in Hearthstone is that when you sit across the table from your opponent, you see what class they are. You know they are limited to what they can do as far as spells and specific minions to their deck. This is a skill for any, and we need to be able to get a good read on that and have good knowledge of that. This is a skill that you could use for any archetype, but for the aggro archetype, we need to recognize and be aware of how our opponent can counter our plays, because they're playing reactionary to us most of the time, especially when a board wipe is possible. Getting set back and losing card advantage, whether literal or virtual, can cost you games. So, like, for example, you might like you're playing, if it's getting to the point where I think he could have a board wipe combo. Maybe you don't want to go all in on your hand. You maybe just want to like kind of hold back a little bit, or maybe you want to force his hand and try to force a board wipe when you know you can rebuild very quickly.
Yeah. One of the most common mistakes I think people make is if they have a board which is likely to be cleared anyway. So like, say they've got 3 mid-sized minions on board. They're playing against something like a big spell mage, which is going into turn 4 with the coin. Is that board likely to be coin Dragon's Fury if they have it? Yes. So if you commit further to that, you are essentially losing resources for no gain. So if you are in a situation like that, often the best thing to do is to hold all your resources back, because you're maintaining a continuous source of minion damage while not committing any further resources.
Yeah, because if you commit, like, once you make that committal, especially if you get low on cards, it makes it a lot harder for you to bounce back in the event of a catastrophe. And in an aggro deck, that can easily be one of those minutiae decisions that either is I win this game or I don't.
Yeah, having an immediate refill as an aggro deck if you are cleared is really important. Because if you don't, then you will just run out of steam. And as an aggro deck, if you're at the point where you're playing 1 minion per turn, that is often the point where you will start losing the game, as it's often very easy for other decks to deal with 1 minion. It can be quite difficult for them to deal with several all played in one go.
Yeah, because certain classes don't necessarily have board wipes that can, or a consistent stream of board wipes that can use to clear multiple minions, or a stream of minions that can combat your either like wide board, which goes into the subtopic on reading opponent. Sometimes you need. I want to talk really quick about going wide versus going tall, and this is kind of like a board position thing. So when we mean board position, we mean your minions on the board in comparison to your opponent's minions on the board, like whether that dictates like if you have an advantage or not. So going wide in the sense of Hearthstone means you want to basically many minions is going across the board trying to fill as many minion spots as you can. So it may be a bunch of it's usually a bunch of small minions that when we talk about going wide. That typically happens in like token decks, like Token Shaman, or Token Druid, or
Wild Odd Aggro Druid.
or Wild Odd Aggro Druid. Going tall means you have less minions, but they're much bigger. So
fewer minions.
Yeah, fewer minions. So maybe you have like 2 minions, 3 minions, but they're much bigger. So you have to determine whether going. Sometimes it's hard to determine whether I want to go wide or I want to go tall with my board. Like, do I want to just like buff up one guy, or do I want to have a whole bunch of small guys? I usually would say, like, for as far as board position, having the best thing to do in an aggro deck is to have multiple threats on the board, because they have to they have to have answers to all of those for the most part, or they will die very quickly.
Yep, having more than one like kind of must kill minion is generally the best possible position you can put any kind of reactive deck.
Right.
So the most relevant example that I think we have in Hearthstone right now is if you have a Tundra Rhino and a Scavenging Hyena on the board at the same time. That's scary because it's two moderately difficult to kill minions, which are generally immune to one, like together. They'll at least one will survive most board wipes in the game, and if either one survives, your opponent will be in a completely terrible position. Sort of engineering situations like that, where you have two must-kill minions with maybe some other minions dotted about on the board, is generally a pretty good position to put yourself in. But also, there's no correct answer what's going better, going wide or going tall. It's really dependent on what kind of class you're playing against. So knowing what your opponent is able to do is the most important thing.
Yeah, that comes in with the whole reading the opponent thing, which was reading the opponent thing. You just have to have knowledge. The other thing is, it's when it comes to buffing minions, it's usually better to spread them out, like as opposed to going all. Sometimes you want to go all in on one guy, like. For example, against Druid, going all in on one guy is very good because they have Druid lacks single target removal, but against
naturalize.
Well, they have a very low amount of single target removal. With the exception of naturalize, and in wild they have mulch too, which I don't think is getting played.
Generally not.
So. But sometimes it's better to spread out. Like, let's say you're playing Paladin, you have a 2/2 and a 1/1, and I have a Blessing and Kings in hand. I'm probably gonna buff the 1/1 in most circumstances, because that gives me like more threat, it gives me the same amount of power on the board, but it spreads it out, as opposed to invest all in one minion kind of thing.
Yeah, often you want to buff your least threatening minion, or one which doesn't have any kind of alternate effect, in the case that you're worried about things like silences.
Right, because silences, and it's the infamous, there's a bunch of stuff that can ruin your aggro plans, such as the infamous, or the greatest enemy to the aggro deck, the taunt minion.
Those pesky taunts.
Those pesky taunt minions, and we have to be ready to deal with those. So that goes along with reading the opponent too, but also making decisions on where we're putting our power on the board. And then the last fundamental, and this is probably the biggest one, evaluating lethal opportunities. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and with an aggro deck, your shot is opportunities to reduce your opponent's life total to 0. Playing fast and playing aggressive don't go hand in hand whatsoever. So take your time and evaluate how much damage you can do, and determine how long it would take to finish off your opponent. So every turn when you're playing aggro, you should be saying you definitely want to calculate how much what is the most possible damage I could do. So it's okay to take a step back and take your time, count it up, play out different scenarios, see if you can lethal, because if you miss a lethal, that can sometimes open the door for your opponent to reel the game back in.
Oh yeah, they often will, because if you realize you've missed a lethal as well, then you kind of will often hone in on that and be like, oh man, I screwed this up, and then just make more mistakes.
Yeah.
Like what you say about taking your time is, I think, the most important thing that anyone who's looking to improve their game can do. The biggest single mistake anyone makes is playing fast, playing on autopilot, because unless you are someone like Casey, who is an actual genius at Hearthstone and has played every matchup so much they can autopilot, if you do that, you will make a lot of mistakes. Like, take your time, think about what you want to do this turn, how you want to sequence things, what is the correct order to do things, and then you won't make silly mistakes like a lot of players do.
Yeah, you will miss like a lethal opportunity to and potentially getting a win. And the other
Or you will do something like killing minions against a hunter in the wrong order, so you buff up their hyena, and then you can't kill the hyena.
yeah, but no one would ever
Stuff
do
like
that.
I've seen so many people do that. It happens a lot.
So on the topic of lethal, I also want to talk about this Irish name. Maybe if you're in Hearthstone circles, maybe you hear, or card game circles, you have this, you hear this slang term called the clock. So the clock basically means how many turns it's going to be before you can kill your opponent. A faster clock means that they are so what if they say they're on a fast clock, that means the opponent has fewer turns to live before before you will kill them. A slower clock means that they will basically buy more time. And we obviously, as the aggro deck, we want to increase our clock and decrease our opponent's clock.
Yeah, so the clock is basically, for your opponent, it's a countdown until they are dead. So the more threat you have on the board, the more attack, the less defense they have on their side of the board, the less healing, the less board wipes. Their clock decreases with that. So say you put 8 power on the board and your opponent can't deal with any of it. They are immediately on like an under 4 turn clock. If you add to that, which you probably shouldn't, as we mentioned previously, then their clock is ever decreasing. Hero powers, burn cards, things like that will be decreasing it even further. So it's all really important, like what we said before about counting your potential damage over your next few turns. Thinking, okay, so if I do these things over the next 3 turns, I will win the game. If I have this to deal with a taunt minion, I have this to deal with another kind of minion that they play. So, yeah, like you say, the clock is something that should be in your mind at all times. Playing aggro is essentially glorified maths.
Well, playing Hearthstone is glorified maths, basically.
But I think aggro is the most mathematically pure of the different kinds of archetypes, because aggro, if you play it well, is a lot of counting.
Yeah,
and a lot of adding up.
Yeah, a really good aggro player is constantly like evaluating numbers in their head of what they can do.
Yeah, like examples of like there are some fantastic aggro players. Like Samuel Sao is one player who is just absolutely fantastic at aggro. I think Ant is another one. Some players just really like being able to kind of push the initiative and put their opponent in the position that they have to react, or they will just lose the game.
Yeah, basically, basically you want like tightening, aka tightening the screws is what they get, or applying pressure. Huh?
Yeah. Recently, I've had the pleasure of I've had a consistent casting partner in the player Green Sheep, who is another fantastic aggro player, and kind of getting to cast with him, discuss things with him has strengthened my own aggro game by quite a lot, because he is really good.
Speaking of strengthening your own aggro game, let's talk about strategies versus the other archetypes. So the first archetype we're going to run into, which we actually probably have the most advantage against, is combo decks.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the kind of rock, paper, scissors nature, and its like simplest form is aggro should be good against combo should be good against control, and control should be good against aggro. So versus combo decks generally have a lot of combo pieces by nature, which means that they, compared to say control decks, will have to cut defensive tools. So this means that an aggro player versus a combo deck will often have a lot more freedom to commit, assuming you know what the combo deck is, the kind of tools that they are likely to have, the kind of tools that they are likely to not have, most importantly. You can kind of use that knowledge to your advantage to just push a bit more than you would against, say, a control deck. And you're often more free to go almost all in, because you know that you just want to end the game as quickly as possible, because if they get to their combo, you're in a very bad position, but as an aggro deck, you can just make sure that they don't reach that point ever.
Yeah, so combo decks are like looking to they're basically looking to buy time, or what we call, like they say in the card game word, durdle. They like to durdle around a lot. They like to slow you down so they can put the pieces together of their combo. But as an aggro deck, you're applying pressure early, so they shouldn't have as much time as they would otherwise. Because they need to spend turns playing weaker minions in order to, like, they'll play weaker minions in order to do stuff like draw cards, get through their deck faster, use more mana for that kind of stuff, as opposed to defensively dealing with what you do.
Yep. But also by playing really aggressively, committing more to the board, you make it so that the combo player can't afford the luxury of, like you say, playing weaker things, being passive, drawing cards. They need to use all their mana just to deal with what you're doing. And by doing that, you are essentially buying yourself more turns throughout the game. Because if they're not drawing cards, that means that you have longer to draw cards yourself, to draw threats, and to put things out on the board. So the key versus combo is to just play as aggressively as possible.
Yeah, just put as much pressure on them to react, to force a possible reaction into what you're doing as possible, and get their life total, drop their life total quickly. Because a lot of combo decks also don't. The defensive tools they have don't usually involve healing, so if you get their life total down pretty quick,
unless they're priest
or paladin, yeah. So like priest and paladin are probably the most prevalent combo decks right now, so they do have healing. But you can mitigate that by having constant streams of damage.
Yep. So the next kind of archetype you often have to play against as an aggro deck is control. Now, what we say in the kind of traditional triangle is that control is generally favored against aggro. So if you're playing like kind of from the back foot, as it were, this is the kind of matchup where you need to be a lot more considered in what you do. You need to be a bit more restrained, and you need to have a good knowledge of your opponent's deck. This is the kind of matchup where having like a good general knowledge of Hearthstone, of the cards you're likely to find in different archetypes, is really important, because you need to know what are the control deck's power turns. So for a big spell mage, it's 5 mana, 6 mana, 7 mana. That's when Dragon's Fury, Blizzard, Flame Strike. For a warrior, an odd warrior, it's 5, where they can either Brawl or Hero Power, Reckless Flurry. For a warlock, it's 4 when they Hellfire, or 2 with a Defile if you don't play around it properly. But again, just the concept of playing around Defile, that is knowing what is in your opponent's deck, so you can adjust your board accordingly so that you will always have something survive. So you need to, going into those power turns as an aggro deck, you want to engineer a situation where you think, okay, my opponent will play a card which does this much damage to the board in most situations. I want to either have Divine Shield minions, or I want to have a minion with high enough health that it will survive this. So on the following turn, I have something on the board I can redevelop, and I can still be pushing a little bit of damage every turn. Because any turn where your opponent completely clears the board, forcing you to redevelop, gives them an opportunity to kind of stabilize. Because once they stop taking damage for an entire turn, you redevelop, they clear your board again. And that kind of cycle will mean that they're getting more value from their cards than you are, because they're killing 2 or 3 minions with 1 card. They will sort of start outvaluing you, they'll stabilize, and they will eventually win the game in that situation.
Yeah, so Control is usually looking to play more reactive to what you're doing, as opposed to you or to being proactive to what they could do.
Yeah, so it's really important to have multiple reloads against Control. So you want to have, say, 3 minions, which are kind of moderately sized, not too tall, not too big. Because if you have too tall, you're vulnerable to single target removal, and if you go too wide, you're vulnerable to board wipes. So you want to keep that middle ground.
Yeah. The other thing I want to like touch base on as far as versus Control is your mulligan is actually, if you think that you're against a Control deck, your mulligan actually is a little bit different than it normally would be. So like when you're looking at your mulligan, you're actually looking to keep stuff that actually benefits you later in the game, as opposed to lots of early game stuff that goes real fast.
Absolutely. Look, like keeping your slightly bigger threats against Control is often correct. So like your power 3 drops, your power 5 drops, things like that. Like often against slower decks, something like a Bittertide Hydra was like the big kind of keep against Control for a long time. It's sort of fallen out the meta now because there's so much odd paladin, but that was a big one. Keeping a Vicious Fledgling as an aggro deck, even though it's a 3-cost card, it can single-handedly win you the game. So holding on to the slightly higher cost, really power spike, high win rate cards is often what you want to do against a Control deck, because like we keep saying, if you play it, you force your opponent to have an answer, or they're going to be hugely on the back foot for the rest of the game.
Yep. So that's kind of the general strategy versus Control decks. You will find these games to be a lot harder, but more rewarding when you do win.
Yeah, because winning against Control will generally be on the back of, well, there will be some games where you win off the fact of you've played a very high win rate card, like Vicious Fledgling, and it hasn't died, and that will just win you the game. But the majority of games, I'd say, when you're playing an unfavored matchup, will be off the back of good play and clever decisions and playing around what your opponent can do on the following turns.
Yeah. And so the last strategy we want to talk about is the Aggro Mirror. So this is probably a very difficult. This is actually I want to say it's almost as difficult, if not more difficult, than the Control matchup.
I think Aggro Mirrors are probably the most skill demanding matchups in Hearthstone. Except for the really, really long fatigue Control matchups, those are a very different thing. But the reason aggro versus aggro, like you say, is really difficult is because the games are so short, and because you're both playing aggressive decks, you both have very important decisions to make, which will hugely impact the game over the course of just a few turns. So every decision you make is just hugely important. Just which 1-drop do I play on turn 1 has so much more weight in an aggro mirror than it does against a Control deck.
Yeah, you also want to make sure you can hit your minions at a timely pace. You want to make sure that you can quote unquote win the race versus your opponent, meaning you can deal more damage quicker than he can. You also kind of have to analyze when to trade out your minions for his, if that's something you are planning to do. How do I want to use my spells to remove his minions? Do I want to use my weapons to remove his minions? there's a lot of very minute decisions that it kind of like pile up to be like a very like extremely critical decision making. So this is probably like, for me at least, I want to say the hardest matchup for when I play aggro is actually against the other aggro decks, because I'm like, okay, I have to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do, and he's not doing what he needs to do at the same time, which is kind of weird because you're not really a control deck. That's kind of like playing on what's called tempo, which a lot of aggro decks have tempo elements to them, but not all of them.
Yeah, there are certain things you can do in aggro mirrors which will be hugely beneficial to kind of your game in general. Like, this is the aggro mirrors are, I think, the ones where value trading is most important. If you can kind of just gradually over a series of turns win the board by a series of value trades. So if your opponent starts their turn while you have managed to engineer a situation where you have 3 minions on the board and they have 0, that is a huge advantage to you, because from that point onwards in the game, you're going to be dictating every trade and you're going to be stopping them from ever developing on the board. And that kind of starts in turn 1. It often is dictated by which player goes first. Often in aggro mirrors, going second is a huge disadvantage, so you need to be very thoughtful about exactly what you do and exactly how you use the coin, because then you want to use the coin, because with such small mana amounts available to both players, the coin becomes a huge deal, and you want to use that to at some point generate a massive amount of tempo and seize the board from your opponent in a convincing fashion. Because generally what happens in aggro mirrors is the player who takes the board first will win.
Yeah, so because then the reason is because now I have a steady stream of damage, and you have to spend most of your turn getting stuff or dealing with my stuff or getting stuff back on the board to even try. And like now it's kind of like I'm on the priority turn, so
yeah,
I get to do stuff before you do, kind of.
Yeah,
like I get to attack with my minions before you even get to use yours.
Yeah, the player who has the initiative will always have a massive advantage, which is why the player going second has to have a huge turn, because they start without the initiative. The player going first will always have the ability to dictate value trades, so the player going second will always have to have a huge turn where they say kill 1 minion, play a taunt like a Tar Creeper, use their hero power to kill another minion, and then at that point, like, taunts are really important in aggro mirrors, I think.
Yeah.
Because, like, this is the reason cards like Tar Creeper see so much play in decks like Odd Rogue, cards like Stonehold Defender see play in Odd Paladin, and Tar Creeper even sees a fair bit of play in Zoo. Having a high health taunt to protect your lower health minions, which have been weakened by making value trades, means that your opponent does not have the freedom to dictate to make their own value trades. Instead, they need to use their resources to break through this taunt first. That gives you time to develop further, maybe buff your minions up, heal them, and then make the value trades again. So one big suggestion for how to improve your game in aggro versus aggro is consider running a couple of taunts in there.
Yeah, there's just because you're an aggro that doesn't mean you are absolved from running defensive minions.
Yeah, that's, I think, a concept that a lot of people sort of gloss over. They think, why do I want a Tar Creeper in my aggro deck? Because it beats other aggro decks.
Right,
is the crucial thing.
And it hangs around a long time. You can buff that guy up, and that can be your kind of beast you build upon, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty obnoxious play to make even Odd Rogue versus control decks. If you played a Tar Creeper, then you played Cold Blood on it, that's a 5/5 that becomes a 7/5 in your opponent's turn.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's really it's really good. We'd also like to make a general PSA that playing Stonehill Defender in Odd Paladin has nothing to do with trying to get some to keep or tear him. Nothing at all.
No, but it does have the upside of occasionally finding you something Terran which wins the game, but it does just find you a big taunt most of the time.
Yeah, that you
which can
normally
use
don't
to
have
defend
access
your
to,
minions.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that's, I think, the overwhelming strategy against aggro. Do you have any other notes,
Mulligans versus aggro is pretty much, you want to make sure, at least in your opener, you have something you can do on every turn, at least the first few turns.
The early game is the key versus other aggressive
Yeah, if you
decks.
lose the early game against the aggressive deck, it's going to be really hard to reel it back in.
Like, if as an aggressive deck, if you don't have a 1-drop and your opponent does, even if you went first, if you go first and you miss the 1-drop, and then your opponent going second has the 1-drop, you've immediately conceded initiative, and your opponent didn't have to do anything to take it.
Yeah, you want if they want initiative, you make them take it.
Yeah,
And some-
like, they need to work hard for it.
And sometimes, like, and this is just a general thing for playing Hearthstone, sometimes you just need to make them have the answer. Sometimes it's okay to commit something and say, okay, let's see if you've got the answer to this. I don't think you do, kind of thing.
I mean, that's what playing aggro is.
Yeah.
It's playing something, saying, answer this or lose the game. That's just a way of playing Hearthstone, which can be very effective if you do it correctly.
Yeah, and aggro decks actually give you more games on ladder, which is good. More games in a shorter time period on ladder, which is usually good.
Yep, if you just want to play a game on the toilet, you probably want to play some aggro.
Yeah, or tempo, which is another deck type we can touch on. We'll touch on. We'll mention briefly in this series. But that's it for this week's series on how to be a better Hearthstone Hearthstone 101 / how to be a better Hearthstone player. Next week we're going to be covering how to be a better control player. So if you like to play control or are pretty weak to control, either or, make sure you check that episode out. I think that'll be a really good one. There's definitely a lot of myths to dispel about playing control that we will cover. And I know Robobson also loves himself some control decks. So
I mean, let's face it, I just like playing a lot of
you just like
Hearthstone decks.
Well, you just like playing Priest. Let's be real.
I've kind of Priest is a rubbish control class though. It's all about the odd warrior now.
Yeah.
Priest is a combo class now.
So somehow Priest is becoming from being the control class to the combo class. But anyway, yeah, that's it for this is for part 1 of our 3-part series. So make sure to tune in for part 2 next week.
And with that, that's a wrap for this week as well. So thanks for tuning in to Around the Hearth once again, everyone. Unfortunately, we don't have any new reviews to read out on this week's show. If you liked what you hear, please do go to the links in the show notes to either Podbean or iTunes and tell us what you think about the show there. There are a whole bunch of ways you can support the show. On Patreon at patreon.com/aroundthehearth. On Twitch using a Twitch Prime sub, a regular sub, or follow. Or by joining the link to our Discord server in the show notes. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/aroundthehearth and Twitter at @aroundthehearth. And you can listen to the show on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean, as well as watching the episode on our YouTube each week. And with all that, I've been Robobson.
And I've been Adam.
Reminding you to say hello to a squirrel, and we'll see you around the hearth next week.